New figures from the ABS show that retail trade is on track, climbing 0.3% in November.
The unexciting result follows a surprise jump in October. And to sort out more of this picture, we're joined now by Rod North from investor relations company Bourse Communications. Thanks very much for coming in.
Good morning.
So what are the figures telling us about how well or not the retailers have gone?
Well, I mean, the result of 0.3 increase comes against the October figure, which was a decline of 0.8. I think it was in line with expectation, but I think the retailers are expecting 0.5% to at least 1%. And I think the thing we've got to remember that this is reflecting the November period where there was some pretty heavy discounting going on. I think a lot of people have commented they've noticed there are a lot of very early sales this year. So if you've got only a 0.3% increase happening, you know, with very heavy discounting, you've got to sort of wonder, well, how's December, January, February, you know, going to pan out? So I think there's some reasonable concern. And of course, the big issue with the retailers is a lot of them have got, you know, very significant inventory. And what they'll have to do with that inventory is try and run it down. And if they can't do that, obviously, you know, it'll be a question of, you know, how much more will they be ordering into this year. So I think there's some concern there, and it sort of came off the back of that November surprise increase by the Reserve Bank of 25 basis points, taking the cash rate up to 4.75%. I think people have become pretty conservative, you know, with their spending, and of course that's quite apart from, you know, what's happened, you know, subsequent to that with, you know, the online boom that seems to be happening with people.
Well, so they say, a boom, but then, you know, other people say it's 2 or 3%.
Well, I think it's 2 or 3%, but I think the big thing is that's a growing indication, and of course I think a lot of the retailers are now starting to realise they need to embrace that side of selling more. I think because of all the publicity, people have become so much more familiar with it because all the sites have been published in the papers and people now know how to buy online.
Do I take from your earlier comments then that you don't expect that the Reserve Bank will be rushing to hike rates any further in the near future?
I don't think so. I think the expectation by most analysts and economists, you know, going forward, and in the light of what's happening in particular in Queensland with the floods, I think there will be some considerable time where I think a lot of data has got to be looked at over coming months really to decide, you know, the future course of rates. And I think we're getting back to what the Reserve Bank really saw as that sort of normal level of somewhere between 4.75 and 5.5%. So we're sitting sort of at the bottom of that range. But any further increases, I think, in rates are sort of likely to happen sort of later in 2011.
So back to the retail industry, there's also the figure that came out yesterday showing that all listed retail company share prices actually went up.
Yes, that was interesting because I think a lot of the retail stocks have been very heavily sold down, you know, in recent weeks. And I suppose any good news of a positive figure, even though it's a small figure of 0.3 of 1%, gave a bit of a bounce to the market. And I think that's against the backdrop of an overall market, you know, that's pretty muted in Australia relative to the rest of the world. We're pretty sort of undersold at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the sport with Paul Kennedy.